The Game of Zen explores the often overlooked ways in which professional, personal, and spiritual growth are interrelated. We dive deep into the life teachings of the Buddha and the mindfulness practices of Zen, revealing how they can help us dramatically expand our possibilities for wholehearted work, life, and play.
Hello, and welcome to a new episode of the Game of Zen podcast. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Scott, checking in from Philadelphia, PA, and I'm here with my good friend and Zen master, Paul, checking in from Boulder. How's it going today, Paul?
It's going really well, Scott. It's nice here. This past weekend, I had a nice full day retreat with my Zen center, and we call it an Enter Here retreat. It's for people who are newer to Zen. So we had a good handful of people, about 25 people in the full Zendo, and a good handful who were there for the first time, kind of getting a taste of the practice, and it went really well. So I'm enjoying things right now. How about you? What you been doing?
So I just got back from a convention. I was at a fancy food convention in Las Vegas. It was the first time doing that kind of show. We actually had a party, my new project, which is Flower Chef Foods. And it was really excellent because I like the food industry, but I also like the interactions and the relationships that I've been making, using a lot of the things that we've been working on here. So especially when you get into new situations and you try and develop a business and new people, I think these practical tools that we're talking about all the time really come out in those kind of situations.
Yeah, all right. Well, let's hear more about it and share with our listeners.
Well, and so today's episode is going to be all about impermanence, which is a huge topic in Buddhism, and it really comes into play in everything that we do. And as we were talking about like the other day, what we worked on, like you had been planning for your retreat for a while and you put a lot of work into it, and it came and it went. And it went really well, and I'm thrilled to hear it. But whether it went good or bad, it would be over. It's over today because it was over the weekend. Same thing with my conference. We planned for months for this thing. We had this big party, and now it's over. It was impermanent, but I was mindful about it. I was careful and planning and thoughtful, and so were you about your thing. But these things all come and they all go, and that's kind of the central topic for today: is how nothing stays the same.
Yeah, right on.
Cool. So I'm going to kick it off with a couple questions about how does the concept of impermanence play into the Zen philosophy? I know that you've thought about this and taught it for many years, but how are those two things related, and why is it a central component?
Yes, so impermanence is an absolutely core principle in Zen and in Buddhism. In fact, we have what are called the three seals of Buddhism, and impermanence is the first of the three seals of Buddhism. And these seals are kind of defined as these are the foundational teachings, and if a teaching doesn't include the understanding of these things, then it ain't Buddhism. That's how kind of definitive it is, for Buddhist understanding. So it's it's right at the heart of things, and an interesting thing to attune yourself to at the beginning is that impermanence is something that's kind of easily understood in theory than it is to understand experientially. Let's see, maybe I need to rephrase that. We can understand it experientially, but it's hard. We have a resistance to it. It's one thing to understand it conceptually, and it's another thing to experience it experientially. And that's why Buddhism kind of has fully embraced the truth of this passingness of everything, this real passingness of everything, to such an extent that it really fully informs, the understanding, the Buddhist understanding of existence.
Yeah, and I think that what's key of that is also just thinking about it a lot, because there's so many things that happen in our lives that do change and are impermanent. So how do you basically, as a teacher and Zen master, really, how do you guide practitioners and beginners to really understand it as a big concept, but also how it applies practically to their daily lives?
Yeah. Well, again, it's actually not hard for people to grasp it as a concept, right? We can, point that out, and everybody gets it if they haven't thought of it already. And most people already kind of understand it conceptually. But the experiential part is where the rubber meets the road. And that's why right from the beginning, breath practice and meditation is a attunement with the texture, the feeling, the experience of impermanence. The breath is always passing, it's always transforming. If it's static or stuck, you ain't breathing. Fundamentally, movement and flow, the same way that a river is fundamentally, movement and flow. That's its essence. So experientially, we tune into that movingness, passingness of the experience of the breath, of the unity of every single breath. That's why we do the counting, right? Once we do breath count 1, and then 1 is gone, and now we're on 2. And so we point people right at the beginning to the fact that, oh, you're never going to experience that breath again. It is gone. Okay, that breath is gone. And to start to appreciate that breath is gone. Now that breath is gone. Now that breath is gone. Now that moment is gone. Now that moment is gone. Now that moment is gone. That's the experience that we're kind of plugging people into, or we want to help people plug into. And this is the mind resists this, because the mind is constantly fixating and fixing things, both in the sense of there's a problem to be fixed. We all know our problem-seeking mind is at the heart of a lot of our suffering, but it's also fixed in that meaning of to affix, right? Just a fix in place, right? With a tape or a staple or a paper clip. You're just fixing in place. That's what our fixing mind is doing constantly, is just grasping, solidifying, making whole, trying to hold it static so that we can, all of those things, control, manage, understand, possess, all of those things. That's a huge instinct and drive to do this fixing that we have to learn how to dissolve and soften.
And we also know a grasping and attachment and clinging are causing us suffering. And so the more we understand that something is impermanent and we shouldn't cling and grasp it, the better we get. When it ends, we get over it quicker and we move on to the next thing. So for me, I feel like understanding that has led to a deeper appreciation of life and the present moment. Right. So I think that the more you think about it, right, doesn't it lead to more happiness right now?
It does, and more suffering.
Oh shoot! Okay.
Yeah, which is actually the third seal of Buddhism is suffering and nirvana, the combined relationship of suffering and nirvana. So you pointed out the nirvana side, and then also bring in the suffering side, because when the things we love pass, we suffer, okay, but when the conditions that we don't like pass, then we feel better, and we feel a release from our striving for a better condition, because now we have a better condition. Mm-hmm. Okay, so both things are constantly going on with respect to impermanence. Impermanence, in a sense, is the engine of both the suffering caused by attachment and the release and relief caused by the letting go of attachment, right? Mm-hmm. So that's why really, really experiencing impermanence with all of our heart and all of our body, moment to moment, to let go, let go, let go. Mm-hmm. Allow to let go that which you don't like, but also that which you love. Yeah. To let come that which you love, which is easy, but also that which you don't like, which is hard. Right? To allow, because that's impermanence too, if something comes in that wasn't there before. Mm-hmm. Okay? So that the one state is impermanent, and now it's being shifted in a way. All right. So once again, it's all in terms of a relationship to the comings and goings of experience and people, that we are able to live a life full of suffering or live a life of acceptance and inclusivity and wholeness.
I think it's a great point because it is good and bad. It doesn't matter. Like, and you could look at it in a day or a week, a month. You could say, this was a really good day today. As good of a day it is today, it's going to be changed. Tomorrow is going to be a different day. Or I had a terrible day and I can't wait for tomorrow to come because this day stinks. And the same thing with a year, or, things like that. And so I think that it's really important to understand that none of it's going to stay the same ever. You can't go into the same river twice. The water is going to be flowing, and there's different things in it. And I find that there's a lot of Zen principles that seem to teach us about impermanence, right? I mean, do you have any that you can think about now that are useful?
Well, for example, the core principle of simplicity, or nothing extra. Nothing extra allows us to tune into reality and where we're adding extra, and where we're adding extra tends to be in places where we're not really fully appreciating kind of what is and what is passing. We're kind of adding something new to the situation. I don't know if that resonates for you. But I've got a question for you. When you're suffering, do you have a sense like it's going to change?
Yes. Yes. And I try, and that's where meditation comes in as well too, because I definitely have suffering that I need to go off and take a walk out into the woods, or I need to sit down and meditate. And part of it is like, I go through like, oh, this situation is really causing me stress or anxiety. But you know what? It's going to be over. Somehow it's going to change. And the older I've gotten, I realize that it always does. Mm-hmm. It always changes. As much as you could be in a rut or in a good place, it's going to change. And so I'm quicker to recognize that in my own thinking. And I also realize that a lot of it is in my own head, that attachment to whatever I'm talking about. And it's like, okay, that's just in my head. Like, and work is a good example, because as I've talked about, I've had a bunch of different careers over the years, and, they all ended at some point and new ones began. And I anticipate that to be continuing, and I like that uncertainty, and I've embraced it. But for some people that could cause more stress and anxiety because they don't have the certainty. Nothing is certain.
Nothing is certain, which is another great principle that, of course, this impermanence is really related to. I find in myself, and in others as well, that difficult situations I just think are going to be around forever. It takes almost like a leap of imagination to envision yourself out of it. Depression is like this. It's like, oh, of course, everything is going to be like this forever. Okay. And our negative, I think our negative conditions tend to support this even more, because we tend to get fearful and we catastrophize. It's like, holy cow, what if I actually end up like this all the time? I might as well kill myself, right? Because this really sucks. And I think it's very natural, human wise, to feel this way. So even though we know everything passes, when we're in the middle of a bad condition, we tend to we lose that consciousness, and we feel that it's gonna be around forever. So the keys, I think, are to when we start to really tune in to the impermanence of negative states, then that's the basis of hope and faith. That's going to give us a ground for like, oh, this is going to change. There's a knowingness there that this is going to change. And on the positive side, when we're experiencing something positive, the knowingness that it's going to change leads us towards gratitude.
Yeah.
Right? Now we're gonna appreciate even more deeply what's going on, and that actually leads us into deeper listening, deeper connection with what is happening in the moment, the conversation you're having, the project you're working on. When that mind becomes aware, that consciousness raises around, hey, this has a term limit to it.
Yeah. Yep.
These things, the gratitude and the presence, spark up.
That's key. It's right mindfulness again. And I find sometimes when I'm I'll be in a really fun situation. Let's say I'm in a concert and I have a bunch of friends with me. And I'm I'm really enjoying the band, but somehow during the show, I'll start to think about something I need to do for work or something else. And that's always a couple days away. And then I'll say to myself, you know what, this concert's only got 45 minutes left. Stop thinking about work. You can think about it tomorrow morning. Be mindful, and because this concert is impermanent.
Yeah.
And that work issue isn't going to solve itself at this moment. So it does help me snap back into the mindful posture. And that's something, a practice that I've learned. And the more that I understand the impermanence, the more I focus on being present, really. And I think that helps in both being a parent and being in work, doing this podcast, whatever we're doing, it's better to be more mindful.
When you're attuned to impermanence, things that used to, really just detract from your quality of life, and you're looking at the clock to, have this experience be over, no matter what it is, it becomes actually interesting. Your life becomes more interesting because, oh, well, this is going to be over, sooner or later. So I might as well kind of tune into the texture of this experience. And then you start to notice things that you didn't notice before. The person who's really annoying you, you can start to laugh at. Just don't take them too seriously because you figure that this is going to end. Or even more intimately, feelings of pain, physical and even emotional pain. When you know that it's going to end, then you tune into how it's moving in the moment, and that's a completely different experience of those things. You don't get as wrapped up at them, and they become more interesting to you
and less stressful. I had a situation. I was on a flight yesterday, and it was I was stuck at Dallas airport, and I was 2-hour delay, and I was ready at the gate, and then all of a sudden, they go 2 hours late, and I'm like, all right, instead of getting annoyed, I was tired, whatever. I was like, all right, let me just figure out something. I watched some on my phone, and I knew that wait would be over. And 2 hours went by, and then we boarded the plane, and I got home last night. And I was better able to handle something unexpected like that because I knew it would end. Yeah, it was a couple hours, but it wouldn't be all night, and it would be over, and I would get home, and I did. So even little things like that help you, get less stressed.
Yeah.
I was also thinking, Paul, about how you change. This changes as you age, and I'm thinking about my children. Right, when they were little, they'd be crying, and then all of a sudden we would get them something to eat, some milk, and then they'd be happy. Mm-hmm. Right, so the upset of I'm hungry. All they needed was food, and then they were thrilled. Right, and then later on it was put the TV show on, and then they'd be happy. Right. Then it's things. So as they've gotten older, and also with school, every year, I always like to mark the end of the school year because my daughter finished first grade and then fifth grade and then college, and so even those things being part of a school district was impermanent. I spent 18 years having children in the school district, and now I'm never go back there anymore because my kids aren't in school. So that part of my life and their lives ended. And now they're on to something new. So talk a little bit about how your life has evolved with things changing. And now that you have a much bigger family now, how has impermanence played into all that?
Yeah, well, like you just alluded to, kids kind of tune us into impermanence really acutely because they're growing and they're changing. So we as adults kind of get a real hit on that. And it's also interesting because they don't have a sense of their own impermanence, right? Yeah. They think every bad situation is going to last forever. So they're like, come on, I got to change this. And you just want them to be patient and this period's going to be over. This day is going to be over. But kids, they feel so intensely and intently that they actually don't have a felt sense of their own changingness, as much as we do. So I've had a great gift of kind of inheriting 5 stepkids, getting married just 3 years ago, and having much more of a sense of things passing on a certainly a day-to-day and even hour-to-hour basis. It's been a huge gift because I was able to structure my life in a way that I could just pretend that I was in control of things. And now, it's the gift of impermanence is that we're really not in control of almost anything. So there's a phrase that a friend with kids, said to me a few years ago, and now I understand the wisdom of it. It's that the days are long, but the years are short.
I like that.
With kids.
Yeah.
Yeah. So just, so much that happens in the course of a day. I mean, more than you could possibly control or plan for. And within that, the years fly by. And before you know it, that era of their life, which was everything, a year ago, they were 15-year-olds, now is completely changed and they're driving. So this experience of life is really wonderful, and definitely kids help us to tap into it.
And the days of Paul being the Uber driver for everyone has changed now because they're getting a car, and that changes.
The days of Paul just living his own life and doing his own thing are gone forever.
Right, I know.
Yeah.
Well, you'll get there, and my daughter will be graduating college in 3 months, so my education of my children is going to end, and I've been dealing with school stuff for 20 some years now, and it's really interesting that I'm at the end of that road, and then it'll be work and different things. They'll have different needs, but the parenting actually that you need to go through will change a lot depending on how old they get, whether it's them driving. My other daughter's got her own apartment, and so that's an also thing that drastically changes our involvement with our kids, and changes, to go back to last episode, that our sacred contract with ourself changes based on the more things that our kids do in their own lives.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So I wanted to go to the other end of the spectrum and talk about illness and death for a second, because impermanence is often associated with that inevitability. We all know that we're not going to be here forever, but many of us don't really, think about it a lot. And I unfortunately, in the last week, I'm at the age where a lot of my friends' parents are getting pretty old, and 3 of them have passed in like the last 2 weeks. And it's sad, and I'm sad for my friends. One was, though, at 97. The other guy was mid-90s, and then 88 or something. So the point is, these people I've known them my whole life, and they were wonderful people, and they're gone. And, that's inevitable. We all know it, but it doesn't, when it hits home, then it's like, oh, this person is not here anymore. But we're all headed down that same path. So it sort of makes it's sad, but it's also uplifting in a weird way.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. So, the mind doesn't do nothing. The mind doesn't grasp nothing. And the ego doesn't do non-existence. The ego doesn't grasp non-existence. So they just don't do it. They don't grasp it. Okay, they're not built for that. It's not in the nature of the mind or the ego to grasp those things. But what they do is they have emotional reactions towards what they believe nothing or non-existence to be, and it does tend to be usually fear, right? Oh, well, this thing that is not going to be anymore, and that just sounds fucking terrifying.
Yeah.
Okay. So this very, very vivid emotional reaction tends to come up about that. But that's just based on an idea, which is based on ignorance, on a not knowingness. Okay. Or I should say an idea of what that is. Right. So that's why it's great terrain. Death, the wisdom of death is profound with respect to what our life is all about.
Mhm.
And the passing of a loved one is profound in terms of us not only getting in touch with our heart and what's really important, and it generates the appreciation for other beings and the gratitude for our own lives that you're saying. It has
Yeah.
those things. And it also informs us with this mystery and this wonderment about, well, what really is this life all about? Because ultimately, I don't know where that person has gone.
Mhm.
And if you're around people who are passing, who are transitioning, and I'm on the faculty of a cause to pause contemplative caregiving, so I work with caregivers who work with people at the end of life, um, a lot with these Zen trainings, and you know, and if you're like that, you know that to be in the presence of a person who is transitioning has great gifts, transformative gifts for your life, for you who believes that you're not as close to death as that person is. And you can end up with a much more beautiful, appreciative, sensitive sense of your own life. And that's what you're talking about with respect to these close people, I think, that have
Yeah.
passed recently for you.
I know in some monasteries, when they are training the young monks, they send them out to the cemetery at night, and they chant and they think about it, or they sit with a recently deceased person and
Mm.
think about, look at the body, and really, and I know that's kind of hardcore, I think, but when I read that, I'm like, oh, I can see how if you do that, you walk away with a better appreciation of, just the day, whatever day you're in, because you know that one day you'll be that person. And so to me, that's kind of how I flip it. Whenever I get sad that someone's gone and it's never going to be the same again, I think about the fact that, well, I'm really happy I'm here today. And, my life is not impermanent, just like theirs wasn't, and so I think that's something that gives me, it's going back to attachment. We're all attached to our life more than anything.
Yeah.
And someday we have to give it up. And, even people that have a serious illness, that's one of the toughest things to deal with is, giving up being healthy. So I think that's what we have to focus on. If we are healthy and we have a good, strong mind, we should be pretty happy every day.
Absolutely. I mean, those are the big ones that come and hit us, is when our faculties start to go,
Yeah.
as we get older. And this is by reportage of my elders in my lineage, even with a lot of Zen practice, the profound practice opportunities for when they start to, lose capacity and
Yeah.
capability. But it's, this quality of like being attached to our lives. It's like, well, what are we attached to actually? Well, we're attached to, as I see it, feeling a certain way, and then also an idea of our life being a certain way. We've got these fixations around, feeling a certain way, and then an idea of our life being a certain way. So those are going to produce suffering,
Yeah.
because any condition is going to change, and usually your life isn't going to conform to whatever idea you have, maybe for a moment or a day or a month or maybe a year, but that's all going to change too.
Yeah.
So it's all a setup. It's all
Yeah. Yep. So let's move on from death, because we know it's coming one day, but we'll talk about that later. Let's switch back to work, because I'm curious in your work with people, and check out Paul's work at zenatwork.org. When you're talking to an executive or an entrepreneur, how do you bring the concept of impermanence to their company and their startup, or their, like a lot of the people that you've worked with over the years their careers have changed. And I know you also help people a lot that are out of work. So how
Yeah.
do you use the Zen philosophies to teach them about impermanence in their careers?
Yeah. Okay. So two contexts. One is somebody running a company. Okay. Now there's all sorts of decisions that come in. There's all sorts of situations that kind of need attention, and we tend to fixate on the problems, and then we fix the problem in terms of a certain understanding of that problem. So one way that we can work with this wisdom in a very practical way is to recognize, okay, do I have the full picture here, and is it changing, and in what direction is it changing? Okay, because it's always changing.
Mm-hmm.
So to recognize, all right, what's the condition here that really needs to be addressed, and is it going to resolve of its own accord, perhaps? Okay, so this could be a conflict. Say there's a conflict within the organization. All right, well, what is there a problem with the conflict? Is that problem going to persist, or perhaps if we just let it go and give it air of its own accord, it's going to resolve itself? There's 100 examples of those, all the time, about really understanding where the situation is moving in any given time, because it's always moving. All right. So that's kind of that's in a sense a real practical, tactical way. If we look at like more of a from a career sense, and I do work with a lot of people who are in transition. They might be electively looking to shift into a new venture, or they've been laid off and they're now in the unknown about what the next thing is going to be. Oh, the impermanence is such a great gift. Now it's like, oh, here we are, here we are in transition to really embrace it, to embrace what's past is past, and to let that go. There's going to be some grief, some pain, certainly a lot of self-doubt, comes up. All of the emotions that come up when something we lose something, or something gets taken away from us. We have to embrace those feelings. And we can't try to bypass those and say, well, screw all that. I didn't care about that at all. That's going to produce, that's not a wise embrace of impermanence. Basically, that's just like an angry form of resistance.
Yeah.
And what you're going to end up doing is you're probably going to try to recreate something that you feel like you've lost, okay, because you haven't accepted that loss. So you might end up, and I work with people who do this, their inclination is to go back and to get the exact same job they had, even if they didn't like it. Okay, because they haven't fully accepted perhaps we'll just say the natural unfolding of their transition. Okay, I'm not justifying any decisions. Maybe the fact that they were let go was a horrible decision that was affected in a real cruel and poor way. That happens all the time. I'm not defending anybody, but ultimately everybody has to accept the universal wisdom unfolding of the fact that you don't have a job anymore.
Yeah.
Right? So when you accept that, then that's the way to work with that, is to embrace that as your life. Okay, this is it. This is what's happening. And now I'm in a new place where I have the opportunity for something new to emerge. Okay? Because permanence, again, isn't just the passing of things. It's the emergence of something new.
Something else, yeah.
Right? Because that state of nothingness, or that state of no jobness, is also impermanent. And something else will arise. It's just we're so programmed to focus on the mettlesome or the troublesome or the scary part of that polarity, and we don't focus on the generative side of it.
And by the way, you did put out a great white paper called The Bardo of Work.
Yeah.
I suggest listeners, if you want to check it out on Paul's site, it's really excellent about the in-between periods and how to manage them, because you're right. Even if things are going great, they're not going to last forever. Or if you're out of work, that's not going to last forever. And I was thinking about I had a company where I had two really wonderful people as partners. One was my best friend growing up, and another was just an amazing entrepreneur and a human. And we, while we were doing it, the whole 3, 4, 5 years in, I was trying to think about how much I appreciated being around those two guys every day and learning. And I had a sense it wouldn't last forever. We wanted to have an exit, and we did. And I knew that after that, things would change, and I wouldn't be around those guys as much anymore. But I had that thought years earlier, and it made me appreciate them even more on a day-to-day basis. And it also helped me learn from them. Like, I was soaking up, I was listening to everything they said and trying to become better, because I also knew that I wouldn't be around them forever. And we're still close friends, but we don't work together every day. And so that happened with other employees in that business too, guys I really liked. And we had a really great group of folks, but then we all went, a lot of us went our separate ways after the change. So I think in business, unless you're in the same job for 40 years, that's going to happen to all of us, especially if we're entrepreneurs and so on. So you have to get comfortable with that.
Yeah. In fact, and I was going to say, the entrepreneurial, and both you and I have founded startups and worked in startups. You have to embrace the impermanence. Yeah. In fact, we're drawn to that, which makes things, really challenging in one way. But it's also that's what thrills us, right? Is the changingness of the conditions. So it's that mindset is it's very deep and it's very powerful and it's really thrilling.
Yeah, it does help in work especially when you're trying to put a lot of different things out there, and some aren't going to go and some are. And then, you change and you look back at, I like to do a year end in review at the end of each calendar year. And I think about what I accomplished and what I didn't. And I think, well, okay, 2023 is over. What can I do in 2024? And I'm laying down new things now and so on. So I think it's good to that's part of the meditation process, actually, is sit down, think about, and it could be just think about what happened today or last week or this month, and think, okay, well, that day and week and month is over with. Now I'm heading soon to February, and January will be over. And what do I want to accomplish there? So the more that you kind of practice with that, I think the easier this next day goes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I love that reflection with respect to the year. And a colleague and friend and fellow Zen teacher of mine does this ritual at the beginning of every year, which he just told me about, where he and his wife and his son, who's now 18, through the course of the year, every day or through their days, when something really good happens that they want to celebrate, they write it down on a little piece of paper and they put it into a big cookie jar. And then at the end of the year, they actually, on New Year's Eve, they pull all of the pieces of paper out from the year and they read them, and then they light them all on fire.
Wow, that is fantastic. I love that.
Yeah, there's that combination of gratitude and letting go of that which you're grateful for, which is super powerful. And I think, on a daily basis too, I think that's a kind of a nice reflection to do.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Well, we say that all things are impermanent, including this episode. So I think, Paul, if you don't mind, we do a little short meditation and close it out for today.
Okay. Well, the meditation for impermanence is gone. Okay. So I'll ring the bell and then just guide us into some reflections on gone. First, tune into the sounds in your environment. Notice them rising and then falling. As each one passes, just whisper, gone. Think of your morning, your experiences this morning, your cup of coffee, gone. Your embrace of your partner, your child, gone. Your mood, gone. Now tune in closer and take a breath. In, out, gone.
Excellent. Thanks, Paul. Yeah, everything is gone at some point. One of the first things I was thinking about was the Eagles season, which is gone. We're big football fans here, and we had a really good season and then a bad one, and we lost in the playoffs. So, all that energy and time thinking about football, and then the season's over and it's gone. And there'll be another season next year, but, it was impermanent. And I was also just thinking, what's that?
Yeah, I was going to give you a reflection too, and I meant to do it at the beginning of the episode, but I had this soccer tournament in Las Vegas a couple of weekends ago, and we had a really good performance at the tournament. We ended up going to the semifinals and tying 1-1 at the end of regulation in the semifinal, and then we went to penalty kicks. So this is soccer, and we got through the first 5, and then we go 1-1, matching 6, 7, 8, 9, and we ended up losing with the 9th penalty kick, and I was the one who took the 9th kick. So yeah, so that moment of like having, we could have gone on to the final and possibly won the whole tournament, but in an instant, I fucked up and missed my penalty kick and put us out of the tournament. And then to be in that space where I had let down all my friends and our tournament was over, my emotional reaction, I was just, so crushed and devastated and felt so bad about letting my team down. But that's how it is.
Yeah.
That is how it is.
Yeah, that's a good story. I mean, it's a bad story. I'm sorry it happened, but it's a good illustration of, okay, that game's over. Nothing more you can do about that one. Just come out and do better next time. And, but it's whether it's sports or work or your family, it just shows you that everything is going to change. If you had made the winning goal, you would have been really excited, but the tournament would have been over the same way.
Yeah, that's right. Tournament ultimately always over.
Well, anyway, thank you, Paul, for that. That was a great story. And thank you, everyone, for listening today. As usual, we'd love for you to subscribe to the podcast, share it with your friends, check out the Zen at Work website and sign up for Paul's newsletter. Reach out to us wherever you feel like it. And we'll see you again with a new episode. Thanks again, Paul.
Thank you, Scott. It's been fun.
Thank you for joining us on this exploration into Zen Buddhism and its transformative influence on work and life. We hope you'll subscribe, share, and comment wherever you get your podcasts. May your journey be one of continuous growth and mindful living. From all of us here at Game of Zen, wishing you peace and prosperity on your path ahead.